About a week ago, we found out here in Dallas that the Trumpsters are coming on September the 9th through 10th, and that they are going to hold what they're calling a midterm convention at the American Airlines Center, which is the biggest venue in town, during that period. This is a little bit unusual for them because they don't usually hold midterm conventions. And of course, the speculation is that they're pretty desperate here in Texas, and they're pretty afraid that they're going to lose one of the biggest states in the union that they still control. So they're coming. At first, I thought the problem is going to be trying to bring the disparate groups in this area together to make some kind of united response. But the more I thought about it and the more I talked to other people about it, I realized that this is a national event. It needs national attention, particularly from the national candidates that are running against the Republicans. So basically, my friends and I started talking up the idea of an anti-convention or a people's convention that would go on at the same time as the Republican convention, which would be roughly 10 in the morning on September the 9th until, say, 7 p.m. on September the 10th, and we could possibly end it with a very good demonstration. As soon as I started talking to people, I realized that they were already making individual plans. And I have been since then trying to talk everybody out of having individual competing plans to oppose the Republican convention. This goes back into history. You can study this in your history books about how people tried to deal with dictatorship or fascism or whatever you want to call the Trumpsters, and tried to find some way to defeat them. Of course, if you get really bookish about it, you could study George Dimitrov. And he wrote a very good speech, which I think he gave in 1935, saying that the only way to defeat the fascism that was overtaking Europe at that time was in what he called a united front. And a united front would be a combination of all working class forces and all working class sympathizers, everything that was working class. There was also, during the same period, in France, I think, and then later on in Spain, the idea of a popular front, which was a little different. Well, it was actually quite a bit different. A popular front is not just working class. It includes people of any class that are willing to work together against fascism. So that would include some of the ruling class. Here in America today, for example, a whole lot of people are putting money into the Democratic Party in hopes of defeating fascism. So that includes some very, very rich people and some ruling class people. So there's the popular front idea and the united front idea, which either one would suit me just fine. What we need, though, is unity. There's another little historical lesson that goes into Germany in the 1930s, which I have been recommending for some time, that people study Germany in the 1930s, because I don't think that there is any American precedent for what Trump is doing. I don't think people in America have any idea what Trump is doing. I don't think they understand what Trump is doing because they have never had any experience like this. But they had it in Germany in the 1930s, and if you study what happened in Germany in the 1930s, you can see that the Trumpsters are playing right directly out of Hitler's playbook, and they're doing exactly what they did. And so if you study Germany in 1930s and you get some idea, you can make some sense of what the Trumpsters are doing in the United States today. There was some criticism throughout the years since the 1930s because the communists and the socialists, both of which were quite large in Germany at that time, did not unite. And if you're just doing this arithmetically, if you're just doing this as a textbook problem, you can add the votes that the socialists got to the votes that the communists got, and you can see that they far exceeded the votes that the Nazis got. So you could conclude from that, that, well, if they had gotten together in those particular elections in 1931, they would have defeated fascism and would have never have had Hitler, and we would have never have had World War II. But I had a study on that by a friend of mine here who was a German and had access to the information that we have today. And the report that came in said that was not a possibility. The idea that the communists and socialists were going to unite in an election was not a possibility. For one thing, the socialists weren't really socialists. They ran in 1931. They ran General Hindenburg, who was clearly a ruling class candidate. They ran General Hindenburg against the Nazis, and there was no way that the communists could have possibly joined that. And of course, they couldn't have joined anyway. The so-called socialists, the Weimar Republic, had been in power for some time, and they had been killing the communists. They had literally been making anti-communism was their main thing. So the idea that they were all going to get together and be a happy group in 1931 was not likely, and certainly, if not impossible, very, very nearly impossible. So those are just some of the historical ideas bashing around about why can't we all get together. Well, they could have stopped Hitler and Mussolini in Spain if they could have gotten a coalition together, and the reason that they didn't was because of the English and the French and the United States, who refused to help the Spanish Republic, which wasn't a communist group, it was just a republic. But they were under assault by the fascists, and the Germans and the Italians were able to join in full force and drop all the bombs they wanted and win the war for the fascists in Spain. So why didn't they get together? Well, it was the fault of the imperialist powers, the Americans, the French, and especially the English, who did not want to stop Hitler and Mussolini at that point, and they did not want to form any kind of united front. All those are academic. All those thoughts today are academic. I'm only throwing them in just to show you that I know what I'm talking about. The only way that the Americans are going to stop the dictatorship or the fascists or whatever you want to call them, the only way they're going to stop what Trump is doing in taking over America is by uniting. We've never done it before. We don't have any experience with it. In fact, the more I think about it, the harder it looks. This is the irreversible, no, what do they call it? The rock that you can't move and the force that cannot be resisted. The irresistible force and the immovable object. That's it. That's what we've got. We've got an irresistible force and an immovable object. An irresistible force is that we have to unite. We must unite. Everybody knows, if they stop and think about it even for a minute, the only way to stop Trump in November is by uniting. And some are going to say, well, I'll never unite with a Democrat, or another will say, I'll never unite with a socialist, or I'll never unite with a progressive Democrat, like Mamdani, or those people who just won the Democratic primaries in Colorado and in Washington, D.C. So sectarianism is the opposite of unity. Sectarianism is the reason people can't unify. And sectarianism, just as a word, comes from their religion. Because every time somebody gets a different idea in religion, they start a new sect. So sectarianism in politics means, not tolerating each other and just starting your own sect. That's what we have, and that's where we are when we face the fact, the irresistible fact, that we have to overcome fascism, and the only way to do it is by unifying. Here in Dallas, we were put right on the hot seat because they're going to have a billionaires conference, a billionaires convention, a Trump convention here, September the 9th. What do we do about it? Do we just scatter out and everybody make their own little deal, and one group argue that you should vote Democrat and another argue that you should not vote at all or only vote for certain red candidates or something? When some people are going to say, and I get this on the radio show, we have a woman that called twice the last 2 weeks, basically just to say, don't vote. I couldn't ever get her to come right out and admit that's what she was saying, but it is what she was saying. She was very frustrated with both political parties, and so she's saying, don't vote. Well, I don't think that's a very good idea. I think we are going to have to vote because power is up for grabs in November. The Trumpsters are doing everything they can to rig the elections, but I don't think they're going to be able to completely rig them before November. I think what is very, very likely to happen is that the Democrats are going to win significant seats, and that Mr. Trump, true to his past record, will try to overthrow those elections illegally, just as he did in 2020 and just as he has been doing ever since. So we can look forward to, first of all, a crisis in voting November the 3rd, and then a constitutional crisis, a crisis of the law, starting November the 4th. Are we ready? Not unless we get together. So that's what me and my friends in our small way are doing right now. We're telling everybody we can talk to. I've talked to the labor leaders. I've talked to the Stonewall Democrats, the gay movement here, and of course the retirees. I've talked to with the board of the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans. I'm starting to talk to different candidates and anybody that will listen to the idea that we have to come together, and Dallas has to come together before September the 9th.